Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you for being here with us today to learn about 2023 manufacturing trends, data, quality, and technology. Jerry Abbey is our leader in putting this extensive report together and will be presenting today's webinar on findings from the State of Smart Manufacturing 8th Annual Report. If you have questions during this webinar, please type them into the chat section of your GoToWebinar screen. We will have time for Q&A after the webinar. However, if we don't get to your question, we will follow up with you directly after the webinar. We are recording today's webinar and you will receive a link to the recording via email next week. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jerry.
Hello, and thank you, Kristen. Hello, everybody in the audience, and thank you for joining today. I'm hoping to make this a very data-filled, insight-filled, entertaining webinar. I really appreciate you being here today. And as Kristen said in the intro, we're going to be going through the 2023, it's the State of Smart Manufacturing Report, and we're going to be specifically looking at the manufacturing trends, data quality, and technology within the report. All right. And just to give you a quick background as we get started and a quick introduction. As Kristen said, I'm Jerry Abbey. I am the Market Research and Competitive Intelligence Manager here at Plex Rockwell. And you can see my contact info here if you have any questions and wanted to follow up at the end. All right, so the State of Smart Manufacturing Report. Many of you may know it. It may be new to many of you, but I'm going to give you a quick overview of what it is. It is a report that Plex started 9 years ago. This is the 8th annual edition of the report, and each year it's grown, both in scope and number of participants. This year's report had over 1,350 global manufacturers across the 13 largest manufacturing countries. The insights are deep and wide. It was a very evenly spaced collection of responses across those 13 countries, and it's conducted by an unbiased third party to make this really great benchmark data for any of you that are looking for that, really great insights, and it's a very unbiased slant just to see what is the state of smart manufacturing today. What did it look like in 2022, and what were the expectations and are the expectations for 2023? A couple things that we're going to be seeing throughout this presentation are these big, bold stats that really stood out. Things about workforce, supply chain, the skilled workforce, and how manufacturers are feeling competitively. And that's where we're going to start. One of the biggest things that came out of this year's report in comparison to every iteration previously was the competitive differentiators. Now, every year, manufacturers talk about what is differentiating them from the competition and where they're feeling a little behind. And this year, that's the part that stood out. You can see here on the right side a comparison year over year from this year's survey, which is March 2022. That was them looking at the entirety of 2022, looking back, compared to the data from last year's survey, which similarly was looking back on 2021. And you can see an increase in all of these. These aren't all the questions, the responses for this question. It was just the top 9. And what really stands out to me when we're looking at this is the top 5: skilled workforce, technology, innovation, speed, and data access, understanding your data. What I think about most when I see that, and I have been in these numbers since we got the survey back, digging through it, thinking about it, talking through it, and that's why I'm here speaking about it today. I just know them like the back of my hand. And what stands out to me in comparison to everything I saw last year was this driving look at technology and feeling behind other manufacturers in terms of technology. And when you're looking at these 5, everything connects to technology. If you don't have modern technology showing an investment in your organization, it's even more difficult to get the limited skilled workforce or any workforce that's out there to look at you versus a competitor. And that conversation could be its own webinar. I could talk it all day. Innovation. If you don't have the right technology, it makes it that much more difficult to innovate. It makes it that much more difficult to have speed to market. It makes it that much more difficult to have that data access that makes such a difference if you're able to access not just data, because everybody has tons of data. It's accessing the data that matters, the data that you can make decisions off of, actionable insights, having that data boiled up so that you can look at a dashboard and say, all right, I see that that line is not producing and we need to figure out why. And I see this other piece of data in this dashboard giving me more insight to why that line's not producing at the speed that I want it to. Or if you're looking up and down your supply chain, having a better understanding of when supplies are coming in, when supplies are going out, being able to communicate across your organization and leveraging that data across your entire value chain. And that's what I'm thinking about data when we go through this report. Now, that was the competitive perspective and where manufacturers were feeling behind. And this is the obstacles in Outlook. On the left side of your screen, you're looking at the external obstacles. On the right side, you're looking at the internal obstacles. And these are the biggest obstacles that manufacturers were looking at and how they rank them this year. So inflation, huge piece. Supply chain, we've been talking about it for years. It continues to be up there. Raw materials, microchip shortages. I don't think there's any big surprises here. And then on the right side, balancing quality and growth, particularly profitable growth. How do we get there? Deploying and integrating new technology. Everybody wants to get that new technology in. Figuring out what technology and how to deploy it to maximize its ROI within your organization is a huge challenge. Worker retention, knowledge retention, thinking about those workers, and we're going to get into this more later, but there's stats out there showing 10,000 baby boomers a month are retiring. 10,000. That is a humongous change in the workforce. And then the next generation that's coming in are digital natives. And when you're thinking about those workers side by side, they have very different expectations. They bring very different approaches to work. And again, we'll dive into that more later. I don't want to get hung up on this slide, but huge piece here when you're thinking about those internal obstacles. And using and understanding data, improve that business. And product quality, we're going to be touching on a bunch here. Now, looking at trying to mitigate the risk around all of those, if you look right here in the middle of your screen, adopting new technology was by far and away the #1 response to mitigate all external and internal risks. Manufacturers are looking at technology as the way to lead forward, the way to solve their problems, get it in there and get everyone to adopt it and make the organization better. And if you look to the left and to the right, you're looking at the mitigating for the external risks, mitigating for the internal risks. Every one of these is connected to technology in some way. And we had many selections. I think there were up to 15 for this particular question on both sides. And these were the top ones for all of them. Managing cybersecurity and risks, digitizing business through software adoption and automation, finding alternative suppliers, materials to meet your demand. The shift to cloud, we're going to be touching on more later, but a huge piece for business continuity and mitigating that risk throughout your organization. Also bringing down silos where people are feeling disconnected. If you have that single source of truth within the cloud that people can access at any time from anywhere, makes a huge difference versus if you have a mix of different pieces that you're working in. Each organization, business unit is operating in something different and maybe working on tasks that could benefit the other part of the organization, but they don't know about it unless they bump into one another, have a meeting that randomly has it come up. It can make such a difference having that single source of truth. And adopting software for automating processes, ensuring data accuracy, rounding out some of these top things. Now, before I launch into the next piece of data, I want to launch this poll question about workforce. Kristen, are you launching the poll?
Yes, it should be open. Looks like. It says it's visible on my end. I'm not sure, Jerry, are you not seeing it?
I'm not, but it normally doesn't show up when I'm a presenter, but I have it in front of me. So by increasing our use of technology in the next 12 months, my organization will. Now, I'm super interested to hear the responses of our audience here today. I'm going to share the responses from our audience for this global survey, and we'll take a look and talk through what these different percentages mean, where the answers end up. How are they shaping up so far, Kristen?
All right, looks like we have almost 70% of our audience voted.
Awesome.
See a couple more trickling in. I'll just give it 5 more seconds.
If I had to guess, and I'm not looking at the results, I know we'll put them up in a minute, I would guess the #1 response is repurposing existing workers to new or different roles as a result of technology adoption. I'm super interested to see what we end up with.
Yes, so 48%. That was the highest response, Jerry.
All right. So pretty well in line with our survey. I'm going to move on to the next slide and show those results. So for this 1,353 global manufacturer response here, we have 36%. So more on this call looking to repurpose existing workers to new or different roles in comparison to the group, but not that far off. Kristen, for the other results, did need to hire more workers show up second?
Hire new workers for different roles. Yes, that was the next one.
All right, so very in line. And my biggest takeaway here when you're looking at these percentages, I don't have the survey response from today in front of me, but I do have this 89% of manufacturers expect to maintain or grow employment as a result of technology adoption. And it sounds like we have a similar amount on the call today. And this stood out to me so much because people often fear technology as taking away jobs. And what it really does is, especially looking at process automation, we're going to see data later where process automation comes in as ranking extremely high in terms of what manufacturers are looking to do with technology, because you can automate those redundant tasks when you're already having difficulty bringing in skilled labor, bringing in labor of any sort. If you can automate those jobs that not a lot of people even really are looking for or want to do, it makes a huge difference. And you're creating more value added jobs. You're repurposing workers that are already there. So you're showing that you are investing in not just the organization, but your people. You're showing them that you trust them with a higher level purpose and putting them into more value add for the organization positions. And it makes such a difference for the organization when you can automate those lower level pieces, up level other workers, and then create, hopefully, a catalyst for growth. And when you're doing that, you're adopting technology, you have a good plan in place, you're repurposing people for more value added positions, then that triggers that need to hire more workers because you're seeing that growth within the organization from the decisions you're making and the way that you're launching and implementing technology. Now, thinking about that and tying in leadership challenges and workforce related obstacles. So one of the biggest things that stood out to me in these leadership obstacles, we're almost always going to see identifying and implementing new technologies as a top issue. Assessing business needs and technology talent fit. You're looking at technology to mitigate issues, you're trying to bring it in, but figuring out where it fits, what the business need is, if you're getting all the right stakeholders in, what talent you have that aligns to the technology you're adopting, what talent you can recruit if you need it for the technology that you're bringing in. These are very complex issues that take teams of people to collaborate and figure out a plan, design your technology roadmap, and really put that time in to make sure that your investment is maximized. But looking at these other pieces here, effectively managing people and resources and understanding how to manage the next generation of workers. Like I said before, that 10,000 a month baby boomers retiring, digital natives coming in, and creating that bridge between those generations, building a structure for knowledge retention for your organization that can transfer to that next generation, and adopting the technology that's going to attract those digital natives to want to work at your organization. These are big challenges to tackle. And when we're looking at these workforce related obstacles on the right-hand side of the screen, training current employees on updated process, change management. Change management is such a critical component when we're talking about technology, and it cannot be understated. Change management and continuous across your adoption phases and beyond to get people to use the technology, share their best practices, share their pains so that you can work together and adjust around them and find ways to improve that and get out of a pain situation into a production situation. It makes all the world of difference. And moving in, thinking about workforce, I have the next poll question. Which of the following best describes your organization's current efforts around ESG, environmental, social, and governance, and sustainability? This is another question I'm super curious what our audience response will be. If I had to guess, I would guess the majority have around the informal, or some locations have a formal policy. That middle of the answers pack. Kristen, how's it looking so far?
All right, we have almost a third of our audience voting. Yep. Okay, a lot of votes are coming in now, Jerry.
Awesome.
And the majority, 54%, have informal programs in place, but no official stance.
All right. So I think that makes total sense with our audience, and I'm going to reveal the data. So with this global audience, we had 18% saying they had an informal policy and 37% having formal within some locations, and then 40% having company-wide in place ESG sustainability policy. And if you're looking at the demographics of our full survey, we go from 10 million to 10 billion. So about 25% of the total survey was over 1 billion, and the rest, so 75%, was around that 10 million to 1 billion range. And if you download and look at the report, you can see all the demographics and firmographics at the end. And I'm just bringing this up now for context versus the size of our audience and the data that we're walking through here. And regardless of where you are in your phases of implementing these policies, I have them in this presentation today because They're extremely important and becoming more important by the day. And I'm going to start with some of the business reasons. So there's a proliferation of new regulatory frameworks, regulations being put out there. Everywhere from the US, across the EU, across the globe. These standards are being put out there and they're making organizations quantify their net zero goals. And if you are part of a value chain with an organization that has a net zero goal, it's going to impact you. It doesn't matter where you are on the value chain, they are going to need your data to report out and adhere to what is going to be financial regulations reporting on their 10K. If you are not aware of these, I would look up these standards to learn more, but this is something that is happening and it could happen extremely fast. It could take a little longer, but we're seeing many customers already impacted by this. We have for the last couple of years. And in this survey data, you can see right here, 95% of the 1,353 respondents have some type of policy. They are thinking about this. This is on their minds. And last year's survey, we had 97%. It is a very high percentage, and it's very important. IDC right here, talking about regulations and sustainability linked lending will drive 60% of global manufacturers to adopt product carbon footprint as a key metric to operationalize sustainability beyond reporting. That's by 2026. Right now it's 2023. They're predicting by 3 years. There's other predictions out there for 2025 that some key pressure is happening. And if the recent proposed SEC regulations end up getting pushed through, it could be as soon as next year, 2024. So these are just some things to be aware of. And one of the most interesting pieces within all of this data around sustainability and ESG was the drivers. So last year in our questions, we saw a lot of answers around the potential to do good, having a positive social impact, fostering the collaborative environment. And while we've seen that in the responses this year, the top two things really stand out to me. Improving efficiency is number one. A competitive differentiator, number two. People are seeing everything that I just talked to, thinking about how it is impacting their business, and are shifting to see that if they're going to be part of a larger value chain, they can make this competitive differentiator by being ahead of the curve, having their data, having their house in order to report out on scope 3 emissions. I'm not going to dive into scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions here today. We do have a sustainability focused webinar coming up in a couple weeks if you want to look at that, and we'll dive into that more that day. All right. The next poll question is on technology investment.
And that poll is live.
So what % of your operating budget goes towards technology investment? This was a new question for this year. And the reason that we added it was trying to understand how much money is being spent on technology and where it's being spent, and what are the top ROI investments for manufacturers. For those who have already adopted technology, what's bringing the money back in? How are they getting payback? How are they getting that ROI? So it can be reinvested into that percentage of operating budget and build out more of the technology roadmap plans. Kristen, how are we looking so far?
Almost 60% voted so far. And 50% say under 10.
All right.
Under 10, and then about 30% are 11 to 20. and 19% 21 to 25.
Great. All right, I'm going to move into the data here to talk through. And I'm going to show the results from the actual survey in a second. But I wanted to start with this. So when you're thinking about that percentage of operating budget, regardless of what percentage you're investing, that is a lot of money for your organization, and it needs to be used in the best possible way. I imagine if I asked anybody on this call, that would be the response, that it is really important for that money to get that ROI and payback. And what I'm seeing from the response is this in this year's report, and it was starting to build in last year's report, was pressure around taking that money and investing in technology in the best possible way, the way that's going to benefit the business better than any other possible way, and almost pushing people to feel like they need to achieve perfection. And one of the questions that was new last year, and we asked again this year, was about technology paralysis. So feeling both that pressure I just mentioned and the amount of choices that are out there. How do you balance that when you're thinking about all of these different choices? What's going to benefit your business the most? And picking the right thing to move forward. And a lot of people are stating that they're feeling this technology paralysis, don't know what to choose and what's next, and kick the can down the road. We're going to make our decision next quarter. We're going to make our decision next year. In 2023, 65% more manufacturers say they lack the technology to outpace their competition. 65% more this year. If you are feeling that way, but also feeling this technology paralysis, that can become a very big issue for the organization. Because if you're already feeling behind and you're delaying choice, that choice can lead to an exponential change. Thinking about the speed of technology, I'm just going to pause 1 second. Kristen, I think you are unmuted.
Sorry.
All good. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are rising in adoption. They are accelerating the speed of how technology is impacting organizations. We're going to dig into that more in a couple slides, thinking about that data that I mentioned earlier. And we're going back to the poll question and thinking about how that money is being spent. So for this broad survey, 23% of operating budget is spent on technology. That was the average across the 13 countries, 1,353 respondents. And when you're thinking about where to optimize that budget spending, one great place to start was quality. When looking at the #1 reason for accelerating digital transformation, quality came in #1. When thinking about areas impacted by artificial intelligence, quality came in #1. When thinking about the positive outcomes from smart manufacturing, quality came in #1. Quality is on the minds of manufacturers globally, thinking about having best-in-class quality to being aligned with quality standards from everybody within your value chain, who you're supplying to, whatever standards are out there, whether you're in any industry. I know a lot of our customers are looking at FEMA, are looking at HACCP, are looking at different ways to meet quality audits that they face, and the importance of having that high and consistent quality to maintain brand and brand image, and the respect of your organization makes such a difference. And I was presenting at PMA in Nashville about 2 months ago and talking about quality and having positive income outcomes from your technology investment. And one of the things that came up was the consistency of quality has been hampered by the workforce. Having people come in, work a shift, work 2 shifts, and go out, and not having that consistency of people that are there operating the same way, following the same quality standards. And one way to do this, and it's on this slide also on the right-hand side, and it's the top ROI investment, is investing in process automation so that you are automating those redundant tasks and then creating those upskill jobs. It makes a huge difference. And when we're looking at ROI and thinking about ROI, right after process automation is cloud, going back to that continuity, business continuity across the organization. And I also want to point out that light blue bubble there, machine learning, artificial intelligence. 23% say that that is the top ROI investment. That number is going to grow exponentially. I'm honestly surprised that it showed up as a quarter of our respondents this year, ranking it there. And thinking more about cloud. Cloud used to be one of those technologies that people talked about as hyped, overhyped. Now, I think it's pretty fair to say that it's mainstream adoption. It's accelerated in adoption for most manufacturers looking to have continuity where they can. And there are cloud edge, that hybrid mix, where you have to have some on-premise, but planned areas to increase investment for 2023. Almost half of our respondents were focused in on cloud technology, automation, and cybersecurity continues to get more and more attention. We're seeing it everywhere. I know many think, we're not going to get a hit with the cybersecurity attack. It's kind of lower on our tiers of priority. But if that happens and shuts down your operations, losing unknown amount of uptime is a risk. Is that risk, however small it might be, something worth having there in the background looming that could happen? And that's one of the reasons that people are looking to cloud technology, looking for that security, because most cloud technology will come with an organization that's going to have a security team that's invested in protecting your organization, which is going to do a lot more than your on-premise staff being able to keep everything up to date. Now, when we're thinking about software that can bring those pieces, automation, ROI, protect against cybersecurity threats, here are some of the ones that respondents today are using. Production monitoring ranks right at the top there, quality management systems right at the top, and on enterprise resource planning. What really stands out to me as we look at this particular chart, on the left side, you have already adopted. On the right side, you have that plan to adopt. It's these top two and bottom two. Production monitoring is extremely quick time to value. So if you're thinking about that percentage of operating budget that you're going to invest, depending where you are on the technology adoption spectrum, production monitoring can get you that quick payback in ROI. Quality management systems, your QMS, if you want to go that direction, it takes a little longer to implement, but it's much faster than going full scale ERP and gives you that very quick time to value. And it plays into all of those quality goals that we touched on before, showing up throughout the survey, quality being the #1 accelerant to digital transformation. Now I'm going to jump to the bottom, asset performance management and CMMS. These are two of the top for the plan to adopt. And when I'm looking at these four, I'm thinking about that modular approach to technology adoption. And it seems like many of our respondents are thinking the same thing. Get these systems in place, build from the ground up, and really have a thoughtful technology roadmap that they're going to follow to improve the organization over time. All right. Next poll question, as we bridge from this, is about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Are you currently or planning to use artificial intelligence and machine learning in your operations in 2023? If I had to guess, I would guess around 50% are planning to use it in 2023.
All right, we have almost half.
And how's it looking, Kristen?
So lower than you expected. We're 30% are yes, 32% no. Yes, about a third are saying yes and 2/3 are saying no.
All right. That's great to know. And I'm going to share some data from this report. And it's pretty similar. So I don't have the full data point on this slide. I think it's on one of the next slides, but I'll tell you 53% of the respondents this year said that they are using some form of artificial intelligence or machine learning. We didn't ask deeper questions for fully understanding how that machine learning or artificial intelligence is pulled in, but my guess is that it's part of the software, so that CMMS system or supply chain planning system, it is already baked in there to help optimize planning and forecasting or predictive maintenance. And going back to what we touched on earlier today is data and unlocking that competitive opportunity. So 40% more manufacturers say they lack the ability to use data to make decisions in 2023 compared to last year. And we're thinking about all of the technology responses here and how manufacturers are planning to drive improvements over the next 5 years. They're looking to leverage data analytics. I see articles about it all the time in Industry Week, on manufacturing.net, everywhere and anywhere that I look. People are talking about data and how to get better access to it, better use of it, how to boil it up to make it insightful data. Hearing lots of conversations about data lakes, but really, I think to make best use of data and data analytics is getting at that data that's actually meaningful and deriving that meaning from it so you can make the decisions that you need for your organization. And right up there with that is increased automation. And I think a lot of that is triggered by workforce issues and figuring out ways to automate wherever you can to gain those efficiencies. And as we talked about earlier, to move that current workforce, we had, I think 48% on this call responded looking to repurpose existing workers for those more value-adding positions as a result of technology adoption. And capping off, looking to the future. So what is coming in 2023 and beyond? On the left-hand side, we're looking at connected devices used in manufacturing operations today. So industrial hardened devices, handheld scanners, tablets, mobile phones, consumer devices, iPads, cameras. These are all things that may not be unfamiliar to your operations on a day-to-day basis. And the reason I bring this up is a big part of this particular survey is thinking about what should we be aware of to stay competitive in the next 5 and 10 years. Many of these things, I think, are going to be much higher numbers in the next 3 years, particularly thinking about wearables, augmented reality, mixed reality, and virtual reality. We hear more and more about this, and the use cases are being built out. So those early adopters are already getting into it. We have one customer who's using augmented reality, wearing like a Google Glass, so that somebody coming on day one can stand at their workstation and see their work instructions projected at their workstation and follow along step by step. While it may sound futuristic, it is an actual customer that is doing that today and has been doing it for a few years. And the cost of these items, the functionality, the speed, all of these things are improving and will continue to improve. And we're going to see more and more of this. So those are things to be thinking about as you build out your technology roadmap, as you think about the future and where things are going. And on the right-hand side here, we're looking at top areas impacted by artificial intelligence. Quality, number one, as we touched on earlier, automation, more accurate forecasting for your supply chain, predictive approach to operations and production capacity, and ranking 5 here, tracking and compliance with sustainability, ESG goals and regulations. We've seen that crop up in a bunch of the questions from this year's survey, ranking in the top 5. Definitely something to keep an eye on, and the growth of artificial intelligence, machine learning within the different technologies that you're going to be adopting. Now, to round out our presentation today, just thinking to that technology roadmap that I've mentioned countless times already, when you are going towards spending your operating budget, whether it's within 10 or 15% of your operating budget, however much you're investing in technology, aligning with maximizing your investment and the ROI that you're going to get on it. These are a couple of the steps that we see as tried and true over the years to help guide those decisions and assemble the right team, identifying those key stakeholders, and really agreeing on your greatest need. If you have the right people in the room and a diverse collection of people in the room, you might get new understanding about that issue that's been bothering one area of your organization and better understand how it's connected to 2 or 3 other areas of your organization, and that maybe you want to pull that budget investment to solve the greatest need at the highest level and help the organization across the board. We put in key questions to answer for each one of these steps, just things to think about. Even if you are a technology expert, we put this in here for reminders. Thinking about if there's a timeline and achievable ROI, have we thought this through all the way? Does the solution meet our requirements and business objectives? Did we create a list of requirements and business objectives and then check that list with different parts of the organization to make sure that we're getting everybody to weigh in? Because these people are going to be using the technology or not using the technology. And if they feel a part of the process from the beginning, that's going to make all the world of difference in your change management and adoption as you move forward. And also on the next page within the report, we have this 10 steps to technology checklist. It's a build out of the previous slide, but gives you a couple more shorter steps to follow, and maybe something to like print and have on your desk and say, oh, yep, did that, and go through it. So with that, I want to say thank you very much, and I would love to answer any questions that are out there to the best of my ability. And thank you for listening so far.
Thank you, Jerry. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. And as a reminder, if you do have any questions, please type them into the questions box, the questions chat box within your GoToWebinar screen, and we can do our best to get those answered for you. Jerry, the first question we have is, if we're a paper-based organization, what do we do to get started?
So I think probably the best way is those last 2 slides I just touched on, getting people together and talking about what the greatest need is. What pain are people feeling throughout the organization? What is frustrating to you? What is frustrating to our line workers? Because if you can get at that root issue and then talk through it and look at what options are out there and what will align with the budget that you have, you can think about how that budget spend will impact them and impact your production, impact your quality, impact everybody, and feed that technology roadmap that you want to build out as you adopt. I hope that helps.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. All right,
Thank
one
you.
more question. Why should we be concerned with things like ESG and sustainability?
It's a great question. So many of the things I'll just point back to from earlier in the presentation, thinking about the value chain that you're connected in. Who is buying your product? Who is supplying to you? Where are things going? And also, besides the fact of where your product is going, how that's impacting your customer, think about your workforce. That's one thing we didn't dive into too much today, but these next generation of workers, there's a million stats out there. One, I think, is from McKinsey, where 80% of next generation workers would take $10,000 less in pay for an organization that makes them feel like they have purpose and that there's value and that they're doing something good for the world. And if you have a sustainability ESG policy there and it's clear and they are able to contribute ideas towards that, and it's going to make a world of difference just to say we're thinking about it.
Great, thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you spending some time with us. And as a reminder, you will receive a copy of today's recording next week, and you can share that with your colleagues as well. So look for that email, please, next week. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone. And please reach out if you have any follow-up questions. Really appreciate your time and being here today. Thank you.